This episode of Up to Speed is brought to you by Darby Field Advisors. Principals Matthew Bartlett and Scott Merrick service all of your public affairs needs from the State House to the State Department, from New Hampshire to Washington, D.C. and the world. Find them at darbyfieldadvisors.com. Hello, I'm Michael Graham, Managing Editor of New Hampshire Journal. Welcome to another episode of Up to Speed, made possible by our friends at Darby Field Advisors. What's Up to Speed? The theory is that you are just way too busy. You can barely fit in time to do your job and, of course, read your New Hampshire Journal newsletter every morning. How can you find out what's going on in the various sectors of the economy and of civic life in New Hampshire? So what we do is we get people who are involved in parts of the state that you should know about. We spend about 30 minutes together. It brings you up to speed on everything that's going on in their world. And this week's episode deals with cybercrime, cybersecurity. Alyssa Rosenzweig is with the Overwatch Foundation. It's a new project here in the Granite State. Alyssa, welcome to Up to Speed.
Hello, thank you for having me on your show, Michael.
So I got to ask, the first things I want to ask is, when I think of cybersecurity and the center of the cyber world, I think the Bay Area and Silicon Valley, maybe MIT. Were you on your way there and you took a wrong turn on 93 and you ended up in New Hampshire? What are you doing here?
That would be quite the wrong turn, but it has been a circuitous drive for me to arrive in cyber. My personal background is in psychology and computer science, and how the human experience and human medical experience, or even the work experience, can be improved by technology. But as time has gone since that academic period of my life, it turns out cyber is now very strongly at the intersection of what people do in their everyday jobs as it relates to technology and keeping communities safe. So it's circuitous, but also kind of the best place to be in the nation with respect to this. There is no one in Silicon Valley. There's no one in Boston. There's no one in any of these other tech hubs that are really approaching cybersecurity the way the foundation is. So it is like an awesome place to be. New Hampshire way is phenomenal. I confess I am not from New Hampshire.
We already figured that out. That's easy. We can spot it.
Yeah, yes. But I do love it here. Sorry, Mom, I'm not moving back. This is home now.
Not moving back to where?
Michigan.
Oh,
I'm from
don't
Detroit
move back.
originally.
Don't move back. No, I'm
it's
kidding.
a soft spot in my heart, but yes.
So I'm required by my lovely bride to say "Go Blue" because she's a graduate.
Oh, hey!
But I'm not. Look, I'm from New Hampshire either. I'm from South Carolina originally. New Hampshire has I believe, the highest percentage of non-native born state residents in the country. If we're not number one, we're very close to number one. And so people bring a lot of interesting ideas with them. What is the idea behind the Overwatch Foundation?
So the Overwatch Foundation is a nonprofit cyber defense organization that takes cybersecurity grants and deploys them to communities currently only in New Hampshire to make them safer. The idea is that cyber is so critical, but also misunderstood to everyday operations that we can't not fund them to improve and make sure that these communities are in a better position. New Hampshire actually isn't worse than any other state in the nation with respect to our cyber posture, but the whole country has, shall I say, room for improvement with respect to critical infrastructure. So we take grant funding and deploy it to different sectors. Currently, we're in the drinking water, wastewater, municipal space, and then the newest grant we have is in schools. And deploy those funds in a turnkey fashion. We call it in a box, in terms of whatever you might need to get you to a baseline of cybersecurity. The grant and the team at the foundation will cover it.
So let's start with the utilities area for a couple of reasons. One is the Wall Street Journal has had a series of stories over the past decade about concerns about water, electric grid, et cetera, vulnerabilities that America's enemies might want to exploit, or just lack of infrastructure could cause a real crisis. And also because it's obviously been a topic in New Hampshire. You had, the richest man in China bought a facility near, the water capacity in Nashua. They're buying several million gallons of water a month, and people are nervous. What does this mean? So Big picture, what is the state, in your opinion, of the cybersecurity around America's utilities? And is this something we should be worried about?
1,000%, unfortunately. The more I've learned about cyber and how the risks present against critical infrastructure, it does not give me the warm and fuzzies. We as a country are very progressive with respect to technological innovation,
Mhm.
improving the workforce efficiency. COVID certainly exacerbated how much things we wanted to do remotely. But when you're moving quickly, things like security and thoroughness
Right.
and robustness against bad actors trying to do nefarious activity is not typically a priority.
Well, let me interrupt
So
there
you
because
see,
I'm curious, like a lot of people, I think, well, water, like it's in a reservoir, then it's in my pipes. What do I care if there's some computer guy somewhere who's after me? How does cyber hit my bathtub?
yeah, water is an interesting sector in terms of critical infrastructure. It is the only critical infrastructure that you consume. So it changes the
Right.
risk profile on it. And again, I really like to take it from a sociological perspective in that what industries are really, quote, sexy, you're going to get
Mhm.
more talent, more innovation.
Sure.
Water is not that. You're not getting fresh graduates being like, I want to go work at a water treatment plant.
Right.
I would love that. There are some fantastic jobs.
Sure.
But it then puts that whole sector a little bit on its heels, and now add to the fact that it is the one with respect to safety and firefighting, let alone you put it in your body.
Oh,
Like
right.
all of that is tied to water. You're in a very precarious position. It was originally the former FBI director, Chris Wray, who really rose his hand and said, I, on behalf of the FBI, am very concerned about this sector in particular because of all of these factors that influence it. So when we look at a water treatment plant, they do have a fair amount of technology helping with the filters and the different levels of chemicals that they're using. Those plants are modern day enabled with technology, and they have access to the internet to help you look at that as a plant manager remotely.
Right.
If there's an alert, something's going on at the plant, we don't have the luxury of staffing that 24/7. It's going to go to your phone or similar. Well, that means somebody that's in another country that maybe doesn't like our country as much
Sure.
also could look in. So that's where that threat vector comes from. We've seen attacks, not in New Hampshire per se, but nationally, where the bad guys kind of get in and they have an ability to say modify the alerts and say that the water, you think the water level is X, but it actually is
Right.
lower. So things like that. Think about anything that we're relying on to keep that water
Sure.
clean, keep that water flowing. If it's connected to technology and that's not properly secured, now somebody that's overseas can really cause a problem for that community. And
And
right
one th
now, yeah.
and one of the things that at the Overwatch Foundation on your website, you note there was what $27 million already lost in New Hampshire to cyber attacks. So I have that right?
Yeah, it's a big number. Now, it's not, it's relative to New Hampshire. It's
Sure.
bigger in other states, but it's not small dollars that
Right.
are being lost to workforce productivity. If your whole school, for example, is down, there are people that are still getting paid, but kids aren't being taught
Right.
because, like, so there's a lot of layers to it, let alone just the cash that may or may not be paid when there's a ransom scenario. That all hits kind of our taxpayer dollars or the private business that may be closed as a result. They're
Mhm.
bankrupt. They can't handle that type of threat. So we say the threat is real. It's not abstract. It's not New Hampshire.
Right.
Nobody knows about New Hampshire. We're just another IP address on the map. Like they don't
Sure.
care. And we've even found that the threat has evolved such that there are certain criminal gangs and the like that are working New Hampshire. New Hampshire's their beat to make money.
Really?
No, oh yeah. They know our vulnerabilities. We know their
Right.
patterns on the incident response side, and they're going to keep, raising the threat. And if you're not keeping up with securing that and the next, the next, and the
Mhm.
next, they have all the keys, and we're all just kind of sitting ducks in many senses until somebody decides, probably another nation decides, all right, America, you think you're tough guys. Let's go.
Right.
And that fortunately hasn't happened, but it's really what we see indicators of different countries collecting data, proving they have access to our systems. They might not do anything right now, but they're just checking. Does the key that I have to get into your water treatment plant, does it still work?
Right.
Okay, that's what, don't mind me. So it's fascinating in the scary way what's
Sure.
happening. And the nonprofit just takes the perspective of
Mm,
let's at least get everyone to a baseline. You can
right.
significantly reduce the risk if we've got some of those bare minimum layers added. Criminals are lazy. As soon as you've made it a more secure lock, if you
Mhm.
will, on your facility, they're going to skip you and go
Yeah,
to the
they,
next.
they don't make criminals like they used to. I've really been bummed
Correct.
out. Come on, where's the
Yeah.
good old
Yeah.
days? You go in and you rob the bank yourself. Now you try a few keystrokes. It's not worth it.
It's very true, though. Let's be real. It's very true.
So you mentioned the hostage holding, though, whatever. We've all heard the stories of you go to work and the boss says, "All right, nobody will working today because we're locked down." They put in
Yep.
a worm or some other tech that's preventing us from accessing our own systems. I had thought I had heard that was waning, that the good guys like yourself had developed tools that were slowing down the bad guys. How big a problem is that today?
Ransomware is
Ransomware.
the activity you're kind of referring to. It's still a big problem. There are, back to the criminals are lazy.
Mm,
There are some more advanced threats, some more advanced technologies that make it less lucrative. Almost every criminal is motivated by financial
right.
gains. I was just in a brief this morning and they were talking about there's so many layers of technology when they're encrypting the data. The criminals don't even know how to unencrypt the data in order to give it back to you, which is part of the deal typically to
Sure,
be like,
exactly.
I'll pay you if you give me my
Give
data.
my
And
stuff
they
back,
go,
exactly.
give me a second. Oh, I can't. So it's there's very real human element,
Right,
business element to
right.
these cyber threats that one day I have no doubt we never say it's if it will happen, it's when
Mm,
it will happen. We will
sure.
all at some point in the course of our careers, particularly if you're younger in your career, you're gonna have a day where your business, your home, whatever, your community is subject to one of these
So
things.
you mentioned the human factor. One of the things that always fascinates me is how many cyber crime stories end up being, yeah, someone sent me an email from a Nigerian banker who said that my, whatever, Peloponnesian mother had just discovered a diamond and she needed my bank account number. And, that's how the bad guys get into the computer system, is people let them, either through phishing scams or et cetera. How big a problem is the human factor, and what can a group like the Overwatch Foundation do about that part of the cyber threat?
That unfortunately, you call that insider threat. Like you sort of self inflict those wounds,
Right,
and
exactly.
we are working really hard on the education side. There's a lot of different programs. We partner with another company called the Atom Group. They have tons of free training, and the training isn't the classic cyber thing that your brain would kind of turn off to. Like, oh yeah, I'm supposed to reset my
Exactly.
password. No, those trainings are in person. They're customized to your job role, your function, the sector that you're in to make it be relevant to you.
Mhm.
So you're like, oh, I didn't know the software that I use every day for my finances as a town clerk. It has this known vulnerability or this known
Ah,
quirk that
right.
actually makes us vulnerable. So we took a really practical approach to it. I think we've now the latest stat was half of the state has received some form of training in terms of
Mhm.
different communities and sectors after quite a lot of effort. Um, but the other part of the human sort of phishing risk is that as AI evolves and the bad guys get a richer profile on you,
Right,
it doesn't sound like a Nigerian, something more abstract that
right,
the average user is getting more able to detect. The threats are much more sophisticated. So it is extremely tricky. In general, it's, ask a friend before you click kind of thing. Be skeptical of anything asking for money, gift cards,
right,
et cetera, et cetera. But scammers are always going to scam, and there's some percentage of the population that will fall subject to
right,
it. Unfortunately, law enforcement has very limited ability to do anything about often the elderly
right.
um, that get tricked by this. It's heartbreaking when you hear those stories. We do try it. To me, it's back to like we have a civic duty to help educate those people, I was talking to someone who knows the lady across the street from him is not sophisticated, and he's
Right.
like the local IT guy. And it's not hard, but just doing that for the
Sure.
whole population, that camaraderie around
Mhm.
this actual looming threat, I think is a beautiful part of a not so great
Right.
situation. The foundation really takes an approachable approach to
Mhm.
cyber. We make it be as simple as, use this phone, not this phone,
Right.
or change how you log in, click this button first instead of this button first. Like we will abstract away for the end user.
But you mentioned something though about we've been talking about the cyber element, like the tech side. We're talking about the human element. You talked very much about your connection, understanding how human beings work, because you have to have systems that work for humans. If it doesn't work
Mhm.
for humans, it's beside the point. But you just want something else, which is the actual mechanical tech itself. Your connection, how do you get is your content going on the local WAN system, the local Wi-Fi system? Are you Etherneted right in? Does it so do tech decisions like that impact your security? And what about people taking the devices out and saying, I'm going to work on the payroll. I'm sitting in the coffee shop at a certain place. I won't really say its name, but it rhymes with bunk and bonuts. And yeah, what could possibly go wrong? And they gave me free Wi-Fi. What do I care?
Yes, you're certainly hitting on some common themes and vulnerabilities to our day-to-day lives that introduce risk. We are strong proponents of if your job requires accessing sensitive information, separate the devices. I carry two phones for a reason. The
I
separation
do
of
too,
church
but
and
don't tell
state.
my wife.
Ah,
No, I'm
ah,
kidding. I'm
I
kidding,
won't.
honey. I'm kidding, honey.
But the idea being like I need stronger access controls on my work data than my personal data, although they can flow, unfortunately, between the two. We've definitely seen that type of jump for a
Right.
risk. It's around there are some basic things your IT person could help you with respect to something called like VPN. Those things are basically adding a filter to the network
Right.
activity. So if you are on an open network that someone else could be looking at your computer or have left something in that network, or sometimes there's spoofed networks because you're at a certain coffee shop,
Sure.
somebody could make a stronger Wi-Fi signal that
Exactly.
looks like it and they're no password and you are just giving them. So all of those things are out there, even to never ever plug your phone into a USB thing in a hotel room, only go power to power because some of those USB things have data collectors on
Ah,
the other side and you're just giving free access. Same thing with rental cars. Don't do it. You are literally exposing your data
got it.
to some sort of third party collector.
Mhm.
So there are just some basics from the grant side, and we're trying to protect the critical infrastructure in New
Sure.
Hampshire. We deploy um, industry grade or enterprise grade firewalls, aka that filter of the internet traffic going in and out. And if you are managing a plant or something highly
Right.
sensitive, there's almost nothing that's going in or out. It's going to be a pinhole of activity that's
Right.
allowed. So our grant covers all of those things. You
Mhm.
don't have to be a tech expert to install it. We got you. Where
Right.
everything is turnkey to bring up again that baseline, make it harder for the bad guys to access New Hampshire resources.
So
Is the
we've talked about the risks, we've talked about the issues, talked about even the dollar figures, $27 million, et cetera. Now let's talk about what Overwatch Foundation actually does. You keep saying grants.
yes.
Grants to whom and for what?
So we are part of some grants that the state has actually procured, and we just help deploy them at scale to currently drinking water, wastewater,
Mhm.
school, and then there's what's called a .gov in a box grant, as in that .gov email domain. So
Right.
instead of .org or .gov or .com, .gov establishes that you are an actual municipal
Right.
entity, so that covers a lot of the sectors in
Sure.
New Hampshire, definitely the most critically risky ones. We have really good data around the different critical
Mhm.
infrastructure in New Hampshire as to which is most vulnerable. So the funding that the state has been able to secure
Right.
is against the highest risk. In all of our grant programs, we really like to meet that organization where they're at. If they only need help with one little aspect of that
Right.
standard best practice, we got you. No problem. We'll come out, we'll talk to you, meet you where
Right.
you are, even up, yes, in Coos County, we will see you there. Doing everything over Zoom sucks. Like, I want
Yes.
face-to-face interactions. That's how we make change. That's how you believe people,
Right.
is not through a digital interaction.
So
So
that grant, so what are the typical things your grants would fund? What's an example of the kind of either technology training, et cetera, you would fund?
yes, everyone gets training. Like you mentioned, that's one of the
Okay.
biggest risks. There's a ton of free training programs out there. The firewalls is a big one in terms
Mhm.
of protecting the internet activity at each of these different facilities. Some of those need more extended networks because it's not sufficient to just do one firewall. So you can add some switches. Other people, they only had enough funds for the personal device to be used for critical infrastructure
Right.
technology. No, no. So we're able to provide a phone or an iPad to help that community along. Our grants are all for 3 years as well. I want to add that. We didn't
Okay.
want to sort of do a quick fix, a crash diet. That's not
Sure.
sustainable. So we make sure everything that we're providing has a 3-year timeline. We work with communities to help them create warrant articles, educate their communities if there's a budget increase. In general, though, some of the budget increases are like $500 a month. I
Right.
have not met any water treatment plant or any town that couldn't find $500 a
Sure.
month to really raise their baseline from a
Right.
D to a B. Like, I promise you, this is a solid investment. All of
Right.
these products are at the benefit of some state discounts. So this isn't even the market price. This is the negotiated and
Exactly.
available. So there's like everything should be too good to be true, but it's true with respect to what's in these boxes. And the email one, I want to circle that one because
Mhm.
a lot of municipalities in New Hampshire are town admin um,
Sure.
at gmail.com.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, anybody in the world could go get that email
But these are,
address.
we are a state full of volunteers. Our state
Correct.
legislators are volunteer
Correct.
legislators. The
But
town is
you,
run by volunteers or people who are paid with a, maybe there's a town manager who's paid or a couple of people, and that's
correct.
it. This is our culture.
So I don't
So,
blame them, but I'm like, that is so risky because somebody else can impersonate you. You got a tax bill. I'm going to put a lien on your house, going to threaten
exactly.
you. Law enforcement impersonation
Right.
definitely happens in New Hampshire. So we help those communities get to a proper .gov email. We get
Sure.
them on real enterprise
Yeah.
platforms because those platforms alone will block a lot of those phishing attempts without the user even seeing it.
Right.
So you again reduce the risk. All
Yeah.
of that included.
When I volunteered for the zoning board, my email was at naughtyboys.net. They were not happy at all. That was a real problem.
We've seen some pretty
I'm
wild emails
kidding.
too, but I'm telling you,
Uh,
we've seen some wild emails, and I'm like, what? And if that's what the community
no,
is used to receiving, then
there you
that's
go.
what they're used to receiving.
And so I want to hit you with a curveball as we wrap up,
Okay.
and that is concerns about the state's election process. Now, the votes themselves, paper, machine, there is no internet voting thing, but voting records, people's information records, et cetera. There have been some towns where there have been issues. There, the software they choose to use. 5 years ago, New Hampshire Journal had a story, one of our very first stories when I got to the state, that these towns had been alerted. What you're using is vulnerable. And the towns were slow to act. And kind of the theory was, well, who cares about our voter register, who records, who wants that? And the answer was, well, actually, there are some bad actors out there. Do you have any information about the state of voter rolls and other election related data here in New Hampshire?
That is not currently a sector we're closely tracking, but I
Mm.
do know New Hampshire's head of cyber, the CISO, he's watching all those things. We like to have really um, just educational
Right.
conversations with people. It's around understanding the risk because if you're, again, already at the point, who cares? Well, no amount of any fixes will get you
Good point.
anywhere. Me
Right.
giving you a report, me telling you, it doesn't matter. So it's a
Mm.
huge part of educating not only the day-to-day workers, but also the leadership in these communities, just how vulnerable they are, how, like, I don't want people to lose trust in our election system.
Right.
Like, that is awful. I don't want people to lose trust that when I flip this light switch, power doesn't turn on.
Exactly.
Like, the chaos that ensues through that distrust is not what we want. It's certainly what
Right.
our adversaries want, because we would be so worried with our own problems that they would have free range on us.
Sure.
And that's not a day I want to see, but we certainly are making technical decisions, societal decisions that are eroding trust in our core things that keep us safe. And what happens after that, it becomes a zombie apocalypse. Like, not a day I want to see. So we work so hard to try to make sure that anything that's related to your core infrastructure, your government officials, at least you can understand the truth and have confidence in it. That's not a left issue, a right of the aisle issue.
Right.
It's just the systems have to be able to withstand to maintain our kind of quality of life.
Exactly. Well, look, the goal of every episode of Up to Speed is to get us to the phrase zombie apocalypse. And so once I've done that, we're ready to
You're
wrap
welcome.
up. But Alyssa, thank you so much for joining us here on Up to Speed with New Hampshire Journal. Where can people find out more about the Overwatch Foundation?
Overwatch.org. Nice and easy.
This is Michael Graham, New Hampshire Journal Managing Editor. Thank you so much again for joining us for another episode of Up to Speed, brought to you by our friends at Darby Field Advisors. This episode of Up to Speed is brought to you by Darby Field Advisors. Principals Matthew Bartlett and Scott Merrick service all of your public affairs needs from the State House to the State Department, from New Hampshire to Washington, D.C. and the world. Find them at darbyfieldadvisors.com.